pretty templatized process, right? So you go in with qualification, which is this prospect able and needing to buy your solution? Then you get into discovery, then you pitch your solution, you potentially demo it, you design a bespoke solution for that prospect, and then you may or may not go into a trial. And then you negotiate the pricing and you close the deal. So discovery really happens at the very beginning. And for an SE, a lot of times it's one of the first steps in the sales process. And it's a great way to create that first impression if done well. And in my experience, the more attention spent on that first step, the better the outcome of the rest of the sales process. So what exactly is the purpose of discovery? On the x-axis is insight and y-axis is context, and I'll explain that in a bit more. So context is really the background information. Context are the facts. It's what got us to the current situation. What are the series of events or activities that have led us to where we are today? Insight is a future state. It's a desired state. It's about what will propel this prospect forward. What is the unmet need, and what is it that they want to solve for? So context is backward-looking, insight is forward-looking. In the maps analogy, like a Google map or a physical map, context is like the map. It's the lay of the land. It's information that's already known. Whereas insight is the destination atlas. And we all know that to get from point A to point B, you need both the map and the destination. Should I be staying?
No.
Just okay. I'm giving you a hard time. So typically before discovery, at the start of the sales process, we're in the lower left-hand quadrant. We don't have a map and we don't have a destination atlas. Most of us are pretty good at getting to the top left, which is fact-finding. Finding out what's happened until this point. Our pre-can discovery questions are great at this. Our technical knowledge, our domain knowledge, helps us with that. There are some occasions where you might have the insight, but not the lay of the land. And the only example I can think of is that you have a sponsor who's at a pretty high enough position at your prospect, and they've kind of given you the insight. They know what they want, they know where to get to, but you don't know how to get there because you don't have the map. And what you're trying to do is obviously get to the top right. And like I mentioned, context, fact-finding, it depends on your technical skills, on your domain knowledge, and which you guys are all good at. So I'm not going to touch on that. But developing insight is more of a people skill, more of a mindset than it is technical knowledge. So the rest of the talk will focus on that. How do we develop compelling insights that are going to propel our prospects forward? So if you think of discovery as a three-step process, starting with prep, and then conducting the actual discovery, and then coming up with the context and insight, that's how we'll kind of go through the flow of the rest of the presentation. Prep usually, again, is something that we neglect to do, right? A lot of times we're in a rush, we get booked by a sales rep, and we don't have the time to invest in that prep. However, our prospect has prepped, right? According to Gartner, B2B prospects complete 60% of their buying decision before talking to a salesperson. So the 60% covers what are their alternatives in terms of solutions, what is the stack rank, what is my buying criteria, what is my pricing boundaries. They've already thought of that. And so it behooves us, on the other end, to know some of what that 60% is, to avoid any blind spots in the discovery. I love this example. I know there are a bunch of Salesforce SEs here. And this example is about a Salesforce rep that was mentioned in this book, which I love, called Naked Sales. And I recommend this book. It talks about a rep who had the Greyhound account and could not crack open that account and was not even able to book a meeting for months at end. And he decided to take an interesting approach, which is he actually took a long overnight bus ride on Greyhound from one town to the next. And he started chatting up with the driver, with the staff members, etc. And what he realized was that the bane of the existence for this bus driver was something called a service log. And a service log is something that the bus driver had to fill out before getting on any ride, before starting the ride. And it was a checklist of maintenance issues or not that he had to go through. The problem was the app that he was required to use to complete that service log was extremely slow. It led to delays, it led to frustration among the riders. What ended up happening was he would just write it down on paper and fax it in. So this enterprising sales rep shot out a note to Greyhound explaining what he had experienced and said that, hey, do you want to talk about this? He was able to book a meeting with the CIO. And the CIO was kind of surprised that this person outside the company knew about an obscure log called a service log and had done that due diligence and had come up with an interesting insight. The rep ended up closing a $3 million deal down the road, right? And he could not have done that if he had not explored what I call the 2 degrees of exploration. So a lot of times we end up focusing on our prospects' problems. We want to solve their problems. But we lose sight of the fact that the prospect is trying to solve their user's problems. The user could be the customer, it could be an employee. And so it would help for us to shift our mindset to not just think about our prospects' problems, but to think about how they are trying to solve their users' problems. So it's a slight but important shift in perspective. And the way we can do that is through conducting an empathy exercise. So again, remember, this is all before we get into the actual discovery. And the empathy exercise is very simple. It's about putting ourselves in the shoes of our prospect or the user of that company, of that prospect. And it's about coming up with a profile, which would be your usual role, their experience, etc. But also, what is the problem that the users are facing? What are some of those needs that we already know of? You then conduct an impersonation. So in the case of the Salesforce rep, it was easy because it was a consumer product. It was a bus ride he could take. But even for us who are in B2B kind of situations, we can do some of that due diligence that a prospect would do without us. So just a quick question, how many of you have researched your own product on your website in the last 1 month? A few hands. Well, guess what? That's what your prospect is doing before getting on the call with you. So it's important for us to put ourselves in his or her shoes to know what they're experiencing, what are the limitations in their knowledge, so that we can address those in the coming stages. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to find what are those gaps, what are those limitations, what are some of those surprises, like the service log, that you can uncover to make that discovery more meaningful. we get, now we get into kind of the meat of the presentation, which is